Make.com has always been my go-to platform when it comes to integrating my AI voice agents with other external systems like calendars or CRMs. However, there is usually a learning curve to doing this since I would need to use the HTTP module in Make and call the Retell API directly, which is not the most beginner friendly thing to do. Well, that changes today because recently Retell AI introduced their official integrations in Make that allows us to call their APIs in a very easy and quick way. So in this video, I will show you how you can use Retell official integrations in Make to make calls, get call details, and even trigger a batch call. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I will show you guys is how to trigger a phone call to a phone number, and better yet, we are going to make this call more personalized by injecting the user's information into the agent's context, into the agent's prompt using dynamic variables. And in order to do that, we are going to use Google Sheets. So the context for this agent here is that it is going to be a travel appointment setter agent. It will detect any new leads that get added to a Google Sheets, and then for each of those leads, we are going to trigger a phone call to their phone number using their name and their email in order to personalize the call and help them book an appointment. And you can see in the prompt here, so first of all, here you can see that I define the variables, the dynamic variables that we are going to use in the phone call to personalize the conversation. And we use the dynamic variables throughout the prompt. So for example, for greeting the user, and then later on for confirming the email before booking the appointment, instead of having to ask the user their email from scratch, since we already have that information collected from the lead, we're just going to use that. Okay, so with this context established, how do we trigger a phone call when a new lead comes into a Google Sheets? So the Google Sheet, first of all, will look like this, where we have the name of the lead, their email address, the phone number. These are the three pieces of information that we care about for now, right? And so in order to do that, first of all, I will go to my Make scenario, and here I have already set up a scenario to basically watch and detect when a new lead is added to the Google Sheets. So as you can see here, I have already specified the right file and set up everything that is necessary for this module to work. Next, we are going to set up the Retell module to create the phone call. So in order to do that, first we are going to click on the Add Another Module button here. And then here we can search for Retell AI, which will show us all of the modules that are officially supported in Make.com from Retell. And there are a lot of operations that we can do with these modules, but the one that we care about right now is create a phone call. So I will click on create a phone call, and here I'm prompted to establish a connection, which basically will help us connect Make.com with your personal Retell AI account. So here we can click on create a connection, and here I will be prompted to name my connection. So we can name this however we want. So I can say YouTube Retell tutorial, just to distinguish it with other potential connections that I might have in the future. And then what is required of me at this step is also an API key. So how can we get this API key? Well, we can do that by going to our Retell account. And here you can see that on the left hand side panel, we have an API keys section here. And here we can create a new API key if one doesn't already exist by clicking on this add button, and I can name this API key based on the current project that I'm working on. So in this case, it's YouTube Retell tutorial. So I can do that. And here we can see that the API key has been created, and we can copy it and bring it back to make.com. So we input the API key here, we click save, and yep, the connection has been successfully created. We only need to do this step once when we first connect a Retell to make.com, but for subsequent automations, as you will be able to see in the later parts of the video, you will not have to repeat this step again. Okay, next we are going to need to configure the necessary inputs for this module to work, and it's worth noting that each of the module from Retell that you see in Make corresponds to an API endpoint from Retell. So if you want to learn more about how a specific module works and what exact inputs do you need and how to get that, you can also reference the API documentations, which I will also leave in the video description below. But here, for example, with create phone call, we can see that from number is the number that you own, that you either already purchased on Retell or you import manually from a telephony provider like Twilio, right? So that's what a from number means, and the to number is the number that you want to call, because in this case remember that we are making an outbound call, right? So with that, if we come back here, the from number is going to be the number that my agent that I want to use for this case will reside, and the number that I'm using is this one. So I'm just going to copy this number and put it in the from number field, because the agent that I will be using is going to be fixed regardless of which lead I'm using, since it's only coming from one agent, right? And we can also see here that the agent has already been assigned to this phone number. So what will happen when we trigger this phone call is that this specific agent will call the lead. Okay, the next field that we will need to configure is the to number. So this is the number that we want to call to, and this number should come from the Google Sheet list of leads, right? And as you can see here, back to the list of leads, we have a phone field here which contains the user's phone number. And when we set up the Google Sheets module to watch for a new lead getting added, we already have this information right here. So we can just go ahead and use this information as the to phone number that we are going to call. Next, we are going to need to configure any dynamic variables that we are going to input into the agent's prompt in order to personalize the conversation. So if you remember earlier when I showed you the agent itself, we actually use two pieces of information from the lead in order to personalize the conversation with them, their name and their email. And we do have that information from the Google Sheets right here under email and name fields. And so what we can do now is that we can add those variables, right? And the key here is going to be the name of the variable that we defined in the prompt, which in this case I'm defining as name, so I'm just going to use that. And then the value for the name of the lead will come directly from the Google Sheets. And as you can see here, in the Google Sheets module, we already have this information, so we simply click on the name in order to map that to the name dynamic variable that we have in Retell. And we do a similar thing for email as well, which is the second dynamic variable that we want to input. And here we are again mapping the email field to that. Okay, and that is basically it in terms of creating a phone call from a new row. Okay, so now let's do a quick demo to see how this scenario would work in reality. So what I can do here in reality when the automation is ready is that I can turn it on and set it to run every time a new lead is added to this Google Sheets. But for now, I'm just going to click run once manually in order to test the automation and see how it works first. All right, so if I click run once right now, since no new row has been added, nothing will happen. right? But say if I go to the lead information right now and I add my information to it as a new lead. So let's say I input my name, my email, and my phone number. Okay, so now there is a new lead in this Google Sheets, right? And so if we click run once, the automation right now should run, and there should be a new row that get detected, and a phone call should be triggered based on that. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, so I click run once, and yeah, we can see that the lead information goes through, and I'm actually getting a phone call right now. So let's see. Hello?
Hi Nathan, this is May, Nomadica's digital assistant. I saw you sent in your details and might be interested in one of our cultural trips in Asia. Is now a good time to chat for a couple of minutes?
Oh, sure, that's quick. Yeah, I remember filling out a form a few minutes ago. What's up?
Thanks, Nathan. I just wanted to help you explore our trips and see if you're still interested in joining one this year.
Okay, so as you see just now, right, the phone call was triggered successfully, and not only that, right, the agent uses my information from the Google Sheets in order to personalize the call by using my name, right? And if we look into the modules to see how it works in details, we can see that yes, a new row was detected with the lead information, including my name, my email, my phone number. Those are the three information that we care about. And we were able to create a phone call from our agent's phone number to the lead phone number right here. And we can see the details of how the call was made. So in this case, call status registered, meaning that it was made successfully. And then we can see other details about the call here. So this response means that the call was successfully triggered on Retell. Another module that I want to cover in this video, which is something that I use all the time, is the module to get call details, right? So what we can do is that we can go to Retell again, and again we see all the official modules that are supported, and the one that I care about is get a call. So basically this module will allow us to get the details of a call, whether if it's still ongoing or whether if it's already ended, and then based on certain information about the call, we can decide certain actions that we want to do, like reporting or trigger certain follow-ups based on whether leads were called successfully or not. A lot of things that we can do here, right? But in order to do that, here we can see that first of all, the connection has already been established, and then here for the call ID, that is where we are going to input the ID of the call that we want to get the details for. So for example, in this case, if I want to get the details of the call that just happened, we can use the call ID from that. And by the way, this is the output response of the create phone call module. So Retell, after making the phone call, is going to give us back the ID of the call that we can use for subsequent operations like this one. So we take the call ID, we input that into the get a call module, and let's say, just for testing, I run this module only, and there you go, we get the details of the call that just happened, of the call that I specify the ID for, and we can see, yep, this is the conversation that I had with the voice agent, as you heard previously in the demo, as well as a lot of other details like the duration of the call, like the latency information, the cost of the call, some analysis information. So this is another very useful module that can help you a lot when it comes to analyzing the call and performing subsequent actions based on specific results of the call. Okay, so you can see that there are many built-in modules from Retell that we can use in make.com. But it is not everything that we can do, because if we look at the API documentation of Retell, we can see that there are a lot of other operations, other API endpoints that we can call that is not currently supported officially in Make.com yet. So if we want to call any of these operations that are not supported, what can we do? Well, Retell also provides us with an easy way to do that using the Make an API call module that you can see right here. So now I will walk you guys through how that module works by calling an API endpoint that is not supported officially in Make.com, and that is create a batch call. So basically this API allows us to trigger a batch call to multiple phone numbers to multiple users at the same time. And similarly to the create call operation that I did initially, we can also inject dynamic variables of the specific user in order to personalize the conversation with them. I have set up an automation to do just that. But first of all, let's look at the API documentation to understand what inputs this API expect from us when we call it. So first of all, we have authorization, which is already taken care of because we already established our connection between Make and Retell earlier. Now, in terms of the body, first, again, we have the from number, which is the number of the agents that we want to use to call the users. Next is the most important part of the batch call, which is the task. So the task here is basically a list of all the individual calls that we want to execute as part of the batch call, and each task here represents a single outbound call, include details such as the phone number as well as other dynamic variables to personalize the call content. So yeah, for each of the call that we want to make, we need to specify which number we want to make it to, and also the variables that we want to inject into each of those calls. Okay, so if we go back to the automation now, the context that we are going to use here is that, okay, let's say we want to make a batch call to the leads, but only the ones with the status need follow-up, right? So if you can see in the list here, we have 2 leads that we need to follow up. And the first thing that we are going to do is that we are going to use the Google Sheet module to search for all the rows with the status being need follow-up. Okay, so when we do this, ideally we would get back the leads information of those that need follow-up and not the rest, just those that need follow-up, which in this case there are 2. And then next we are going to aggregate this leads information into JSON, right? So basically, and this is why reading the API documentation is important, especially in the cases where we use an API that is not officially supported in a module. Because here you can see that I'm assembling the JSON object that corresponds exactly to the definition of the list of tasks or the list of calls to be made based on the documentation. So task again is the list of calls to be made, and each task should have the number that we are making the call to, as well as any specific variables that we want to input. And so in order to do that in Make, we are going to aggregate the information that we get from Google Sheets to JSON. So first we have the phone number of the user that we want to call, and that comes from the Google Sheet module that we use to search for the leads with a specific filter. And similarly, we are also defining Retell LLM dynamic variables, which is a field that is required by this API in order for us to input any dynamic variables into that call. Okay, so I define that in Make, and then I assign the value of the name and email that we got from the Google Sheets module into this object. And so by the end of the execution of this module, we should get the list of calls to be made with the phone number that we want to call, as well as any dynamic variables that we want to inject into that particular call. And then finally, in the Make an API call module, again, we already have the connection established, so we don't have to do anything there. And then the next thing we want to specify would be the URL of the API that we want to call. And in this case, we only need to specify the last part of the path. For example, create batch call, which comes directly from here, create batch call. The method is going to be post, which you can see here in the API documentation. And then the content type headers are actually filled in automatically when we create the module. And then if the API that you are calling requires any query parameters, then this is where you would input it. In my case, because we are making a post request, we don't require any query parameters here. But for example, if you do get voices, then there are some parameters required, and you would specify those parameters here in the query string section. Not in my case. So in my case, the only thing required is the body of the request. So this is where we are going to input the body information. And yeah, we have the name of the batch, which is specified here. And then we have the from number. So this is the number of the agent that we want to use to call this batch. And finally, the most important part of the batch call, which is the task, is going to be the JSON object that I just assembled from the previous module, the aggregate to JSON module. Now, with all that set up, we can run the automation and see how it goes. So I can do run once here, and what should happen is that we should be searching for all the rows with the lead being the status, having the status of need following up, right? Which we do see here. There are 2 rows, and then assemble that into a JSON object that we can use to generate the batch call. And it seems like the batch call was executed successfully. So there might be a little delay in terms of the actual calls being made, but the API call to generate the batch call was successful. And yes, because I use my own phone number, I'm getting a call right now from the agent as part of the batch call. So hello?
Hi Nathan, this is May, Nomadica's digital assistant. I saw you sent your details in.
Yep, so as you can see, I got the call, which means that the batch call that was triggered actually worked. And looking at the response from the module, we can see some information about the batch being made. So we have the name, we have the batch call ID if we need that, the from phone number, the total calls that were made, and so on. And now if we even go to the Retell dashboard, and go to batch call, which is where the information about all the batch calls are managed, we can see that a batch call was actually executed, and it was sent to recipients. One picked up, which is the one that I picked up during the demo, and then the other one was not picked up, so it wasn't successful. And we can click on the call logs to see the calls that happened as part of this call log right here, which means that the batch call was executed correctly using the information that we specified about the leads in Google Sheets. And that is how you can use Retell AI official integrations in Make to connect your AI voice agents with any other external systems. And if you need help setting up similar automations like what I just showed you, or build AI voice agents for your business, feel free to reach out. And that's it from me today. I will see you guys in the next one. Stay curious. Bye.